Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back to the Keats-Shelley Association of America's online interview series. I'm Amy Wilcockson, a PhD researcher at the University of Nottingham and one of the Keats-Shelley Association of America's Communications Fellows for 2021 to 2022. And it's part of my role as Comms Fellow to provide exciting and engaging digital content for you all. So that's what we're doing today's wonderful interview. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by two incredible academics and heritage professionals, Dr. Kim Simpson and Clio OSullivan, who will both be talking to us today about their amazing work at Chawton House. So I'll introduce Kim first. Dr. Kim Simpson is Deputy Director at Chawton House, where she is responsible for academic programming. She holds a PhD in 18th century literature in amateur fiction from the University of Kent and worked between the University of Southampton and Chawton House for 5 years before making the move to the heritage sector full-time in 2021. And you can follow her on Twitter at @AmateurAnon. And thank you so much, Kim, for joining us today. I'm thrilled to chat to you. We're also joined by Clio OSullivan, who is Chawton House's Communications and Public Engagement Manager. And her goal is to engage a wider audience through curating exhibitions, delivering exciting events programming, and broadening Chawton House's presence on social media platforms. And she's curated 2 exhibitions, Man Up, which ran 2020 to 21, and A Costume of Sport, which is running at the moment. And I'm excited to chat about that more in a moment. And alongside her work at Chawton House, Clio is a part-time postgraduate research student in English at the University of Southampton, and she's doing a PhD in creative writing, which is due in July this year for submission, which is very exciting and nerve-wracking, I'm sure. And also occasionally she dresses in period clothing, which I'm sure everybody's seen on the Chawton website and Twitter. And you can follow Clio on Twitter at CleoCleona. And thank you again, Clio. I'm so thrilled to be chatting to you today. It's great. I've never visited Chawton, so I'm very excited to hear all about the exciting things that you're getting up to at the moment. So without further ado, I thought I would begin by asking if you could give our viewers a brief intro to Chawton House. Why is it important? Where are you located? And what amazing artifacts and items do you hold in your collections?
Sure, I'll take this one. Thank you, Amy, for having us. It's really really nice and fun to chat about what we're up to today. So Chawton House is an Elizabethan manor house and a heritage site and a library, and we're located in just outside of Alton in Hampshire. The house itself was built in the 1580s, and it was owned by generations and generations of the Knight family. And its kind of literary claim to fame is that it eventually was passed to Edward Austen Knight, who was Jane Austen's older brother. And so Edward gave Jane Austen the cottage on the estate, where she then went on to publish her 6 novels from. So the collections that we hold, we've got a collection of portraits, which are now sort of receiving the attention that that they're owed. And we've also got 2 main collections of books in the library. The first one is the Knight collection. And these are the books that were owned by the Knight family. What's particularly kind of special about those is that we have an 1818 catalogue of what's called the Godmersham Library collection. So Edward, when he inherited Chawton, also inherited estates in Godmersham and Steventon, and he spent most of his time over at Godmersham. It's a lot grander than Chawton House. So he had a library there. Jane Austen often used to go and stay with him. I think she spent about 10 months there in total. So the catalogue gives us a sense of the books that she had access to when she went to stay with her brother. And they sort of came back to Chawton, I think in the 1850s, Clio, you might know that better than me. So that's one collection. And then the second collection is a huge collection of women's writing, which dates from about 1660 to about 1860. And it was around this collection that the initial kind of charitable aims of Chawton House Library were set up. And that was to foster research into these women writers who, you know, in the 70s and 80s were just sort of starting to be recovered. So the recovery project is something that kind of underpins what we do. So now we've got Parkland, we've got gardens, we have the house itself, the library, and then increasingly a kind of digital program as well. So we're trying to sort of expand beyond an academic audience to a much wider public audience as well. Some of the kind of star items, or I guess the strengths of our collection, are around Austen herself, of course, and her kind of contemporary women writers. We've got an awful lot of Gothic material as well, and this is something that I'm hoping to kind of develop over the coming years. And of course, the history of feminism too. So we've got a lot of early kind of proto-feminist works as well, which are worthy of attention, as well as the portraits, of course, which I love. Clio can probably tell you a little bit about what she's done with some of the portraits in her new exhibition. So I don't know if I've left anything out there, Clio.
I mean, you've covered it pretty well thoroughly. Just, I suppose the only difference would be the makeup of the house itself is very unique and quirky, because it's been in the Knight family since the 1500s, and it's been lived in right up until the 1980s by different generations. And obviously with any great house, each subsequent generation puts their own mark and stamp on it. So I think that's what sets us apart. Besides our glorious collection of early women writing, the house itself is so unique. You go up one staircase and it leads to an entirely different area that you weren't expecting to go to. And even Jane Austen's nieces and nephews, as Kim said, they were based mainly in Godmersham Park, the sort of beautiful, airy Palladian manor in Kent, and then they sort of come to this Jacobean sort of, to their mind, ramshackle, but obviously to us very, very grand and beautiful. And they sort of loved exploring all the sort of unexpected places. And I think people still get a sense of that when they come to visit today.
Mm.
Sounds amazing. I can't wait to visit. It sounds super, super cool. And I didn't realize that it was lived until the 1980s. That's incredible.
The story of that is actually kind of crazy. So it was in the 1980s, a lot of country houses really kind of struggled to survive, and many were getting kind of demolished through the 50s and 60s. So by the 80s, Chawton House had fallen into disrepair, and the owner was going to sell a lease on it, and it was nearly bought by a golf club hotel.
It was bought by the golf.
Yes, and then
they went into liquidation. So it was about to be done up as a sort of golf course hotel sort of thing, and then luckily, well, not for them, but for us, luckily it fell through.
Yeah, so it was actually the lease ended up being bought by Sandy Lerner, who's an American entrepreneur who kind of set up Chawton House Library, the charity. The book collection moved to the charity from her, so she was the kind of founding person behind what was going on at Chawton House. And so it's developed a lot over the last few years into a kind of into a public space and a public heritage space. I think when it was first opened, it was an academic library primarily, and wasn't really open to visitors. Now we're open 7 days a week. So it's really kind of changed over the last few years.
Amazing. So this kind of follows on from that, I think, but would you be able to give us a little bit of insider info into your jobs? I love asking people this question. So what do you do on a sort of day-to-day basis? What's your role, and what's the best thing about working at Chawton House?
Clio, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I broadly describe my role as trying to share the stories of these sometimes unknown, sometimes forgotten, lesser known, let's just say, early women writers and artists and novelists with as broad scope of people as possible, whether that be through events, whether that be through marketing, or simply just sort of giving tours, getting people to hear about us really and know what we do. But then beyond that, the day-to-day, that's one of the best things about working in heritage. And I'm sure you found that talking to other heritage professionals. Every day is so different. You go in expecting to sort of do your regular job, whatever that may be. And then it's never quite that. I mean, I remember there was a day when I had to climb out onto the parapets and hoist a flag. And then later that day, a sheep got stuck in the ha-ha. So I had to go and free the sheep. And then we had an event on that night. So then we were sort of serving drinks and stuff. So I kind of was flag hoister, shepherdess, bartender, all in one.
A woman of many talents, clearly.
Indeed, exactly.
I think, yeah, I'd second that. The kind of variety of what we end up doing has been one of the most, one of the most kind of exciting parts of the job. So, you know, sometimes you're there talking to the volunteers, and Chawton House is really reliant on volunteers who do a lot of the kind of stewarding and that kind of stuff. And they are so knowledgeable about elements of house history and things like that. So you can have a really good conversation with them. I run a reading group as well, which expanded quite a lot in the pandemic. So we've now got Canadian and American participants as well as a quite local audience. And again, we talk about usually works in the collection, so 18th century women writers, and we read a whole variety of stuff from kind of conduct books. We got stuck in Clara Reeve for a while, which was which was awful, but yeah, so I think talking to them as well, and you get a really different audience than what I was doing before when I was teaching, you know, seminars in universities. And then I suppose some of the other things that I do are, I do a lot of public outreach, which is to do with translating the stuff that academics are working on. So since the pandemic, I've done a lot of interviews and things like that, study days. And then I suppose going forward, one of the main things that I want to do is to facilitate research and to help researchers who are at the kind of earlier stages of their career. I think it's a really difficult academic job market at the moment, and we need to be, you know, providing the support and providing the kind of research space to do that. So we had a visiting fellowship program which ran for about a decade, which was set up by Gillian Dow, and we're kind of continuing on with that. So we started off very small last year with just 3 fellows, and actually the applications close tomorrow for the next 6 in the summer. So it's a real pleasure to be able to do that and to be able to kind of keep the collections alive by inviting researchers to come and share what they're doing, usually with quite a different audience from what they're used to. So again, yeah, it's really kind of varied. I could be kind of, you know, designing a magazine or a poster one day and then speaking to researchers the next day. So yeah, it's pretty varied. Like it's not a sort of standard job, I wouldn't say.
No, that's good though, isn't it? That's part of what makes it exciting. I think the variety and all the
and also I think just like seeing the visitors come in. So sometimes we have a steward in the lower reading room, which is the library, and it's my sort of favorite part of the house. You know, you see visitors come in who are quite bookish, and just watching them kind of engage with the room itself. I mean, it's a really kind of it's sort of sensory overload. It smells properly of kind of old books and tobacco, and it's sort of dark, and it's wonderful. I think that kind of makes the job for me, actually, looking at people engage with the literature in that way.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I mean, I think I'm going to be on the next train down after this interview, just lurk in that room all day. You briefly mentioned the pandemic, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but you won a Hidden Gem Award from Visit England because of the amazing adaptations and things that you made during this period. So would you be able to tell us more about kind of how you overcame the challenges of 2020, I guess?
Yeah, my goodness, it was that was quite a weird time. We just kind of didn't really stop, did we, Clio? I think it was the pandemic happened, and I think a lot of people went, oh, we're not sure what to do, and it was a sort of a freeze response, I think, for a lot of people. And you know, fortunately, our chief exec was like, this is not going to happen. You know, we are going to carry on producing. So I think, Clio, you started off, didn't you, with that social media campaign? So I don't know if you want to say a bit about that.
Yes, it was a social media campaign to sort of join in with other heritage sites, and it was themed because obviously at the time the rainbow was ubiquitous in support of the NHS. So tying in with that, each week we had a colour of the rainbow. So all these different heritage sites got involved, sharing. So week 1 was red. So was it red?
Yes.
So objects that were to do with the colour red. So we had the Brick Museum sharing all of their best bricks and things like that. And Jane Austen House shared their Red Riding jacket, which they've now loaned to us for the Costume of Sport exhibition. So it was really nice to everyone to get involved. And then after that, we also encouraged people to send in their favourite quotes and just have some source of inspiration and just something to do, really. I think it was, because everyone was obviously on their devices, but as well as getting outside as well. So we're encouraging them to send in photos, really, just to connect.
Yeah, I think the thinking was that, well, if they can't come to us, we will go to them. And I think inadvertently, we ended up growing a much wider audience because of the move to digital, which, we've been thinking about doing it for a long, long time. And this kind of just forced the issue, really. So yeah, we started off with that. And then we did this lockdown literary festival where we just basically pulled everybody that we knew and said, right, come and speak to us. And we had no video editing knowledge, like we just didn't know what we were doing at all. And but we just sort of we just made it work, didn't we? So we had a 3-day kind of festival with all sorts of different people. We had academics at early stages of their career, and we had novelists and gardeners and all sorts of people, and we put it all online for free. And I think, again, it was right at the beginning of, we're sort of in the middle of lockdown by that point, and people were just really kind of isolated and miserable. And I think for me, it just provided like a huge amount of solace and gave us something to do. And then kind of going on from that, we developed a kind of more, kind of a digital program with a bit more longevity. And that's still kind of informing what we're doing, although I think the demand is changing a little bit now. But I think it just showed us how we could connect with people with a much wider remit. And then at the same time, we had a sort of hyper-localized thing going on where we were delivering tea boxes to people, and we opened up the parkland for people to walk around. So I think the pandemic sort of forced us to develop these two different audiences, the digital one and the very, very local one. And it served us, it did, it served us well in that sense. So yeah.
Your exhibitions went online as well, I think, did they? Yes. I was going to ask about exhibitions now. So could you tell us a little bit more about your excellent exhibitions? I know, Clio, you've just curated the one that's happening at the moment. So if you'd like to tell us more about that, that'd be great.
Yes, because so Man Up was a sort of the first exhibition that I'd ever curated, and we were so excited. We got some amazing loans. Like we got the most from the Bronte Parsonage, was this beautiful diary page by Emily Bronte, and it has a sort of lovely line drawing sketch, like very simple, just done in her sort of ink pen, of her and Anne sitting at a table, and it really evokes that sense of that literary coterie in which the three sisters lived and worked in. And so that was one of many objects that we got. So it was a very exciting exhibition. It opened on March 3rd, 2020, and then a little thing happened. So it was really quite devastating that so much heart and soul had gone into this exhibition and then no one got to see it. So that was the drive to move it online, really, just to really share the stories and share the narrative, share the objects. And so we did a podcast to go alongside it, which was a tour, and then we kind of just filmed just on our phones, really like on a shoestring, very casual, but kind of did our best of a tour of it. So, and then put all the objects online, put the stories online. So that was our first foray into sort of sharing things digitally. And even though at first it was gutting that it was shut, because I remember that first week before we went into lockdown, I remember being so delighted by a much younger audience that we'd ever seen, really looking around the exhibition. I was like, oh, this is great. It was upsetting that we'd like lost that momentum in terms of it was open, then it was shut. But then actually by putting it online, I think a lot more people got to see Man Up than they would have before. And Kim, I mean, you can literally map how far the Man Up reach was.
We decided at the end of the exhibition, because one of the things that we're thinking about is how we can give some of our exhibitions afterlives. So much work goes into them, and so it's thinking about what you can do with them. So with this one, we did a creative writing competition, and we sent it out to, I think it was 16 to 18 and 18 to 25 prose and poetry, and I put it on a few websites and things like that, and we just got this enormous response from all over the place. So we had entrants from India and Indonesia and South America, and it was really, really great. So I think that's something that we'll do, in coming years. But it was to write something that was based on the exhibition itself. And I mean, some of the entrants they were brilliant, weren't they, Claire? There was the winner of the poetry was a Chinese woman who was just one of the best poems. It was really, really heartening, I think, to see the response to it. So, so yeah, there is, there was considerable reach for that.
That's incredible. I can't believe that you, that you got that wider reach. As you say, I think that is the best thing about putting things online, isn't it, in the digital, and continuing that moving forward. Would you be able to tell us more about the costume exhibition, Clio, that's on at the moment? I'm dying to hear about it.
Yes, yeah. So it's about the first half of the exhibition is a sort of homage to our collection, our women writers collection. So the room 1 of the exhibition is dedicated to Georgian and Regency sport as an exercise, as played and performed by ladies. So and it's demonstrated through costumes. So because when I was researching it, I was just doing sport, and as I continued along, I sort of thought, well, they didn't really seem to have adapted fashion to physical exertion in any way, shape or form. And I just found that really, really fascinating. And it gave it a bit more of a sort of direction and a bit more finesse to it, really, rather than, because I think sometimes with sport, I mean, I find stats interesting in sort of, but it's not necessarily, doesn't communicate well in an exhibition like, oh, and Hampshire ladies won by 50 runs against Surrey and stuff. So I put that in. But so and also it's following on from the Botanical Women exhibition, which was so beautiful, so visual. I did still want to have something that people could engage with visually. So the first half of the exhibition is on sport and exercise as played by ladies. So riding is one, because riding habits are just so stunning and beautiful. And what's interesting about them is riding habits were made by tailors rather than dressmakers. So that's why they're just inherently so much more masculine, and the button left over right, they have these big military sleeves and cuffs. And then also sea bathing, so tap into Sanditon. And we actually have on loan the dress worn by Charlotte Hayward in episode 1 of Sanditon, where she takes a dip, takes the flounce, as it was called, out of a bathing machine. And I also look at walking, because of course walking is so important in Jane Austen's literature and Jane Austen herself. And so we have some great fashion plates demonstrating walking dresses. And also on loan, we have some Regency patterns, which for those who don't know, patterns are kind of these clumsy clogs or overshoes nailed to metal rings. And that it gives a slight sort of elevation because roads were basically dirt. So it just protects your shoes and the hems of your gowns. And Jane Austen talks about the ceaseless clink of patterns in Persuasion. So they were banned from churches because they make such a racket on the because it's just clink, 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 clink. And so yes, and then I end on ladies cricket because just very interesting. And also, again, they sort of wore their usual morning dress with it, but did play it, and there were sort of official matches. And then the second half of the exhibition looks at sport as played in Chawton House and on the estate, because of course, what is the point of having a country estate so gentlemen can view their sporting enjoyments and all the rest of it. And again, Jane Austen talks about that in her novel. She sort of, whenever she says sport, she is referring to hunting and shooting and fishing and all of that. It's sort of the mark of a gentleman that you're playing these sports. But before we get to that, I talk about, leading on from ladies cricket, I talk about gentlemen's cricket, because Jane Austen's nephews were really, really good cricket players. They played first class cricket, and they were sort of renowned in their day for their abilities. And her nephew, George Knight, whose portrait I have up in the exhibition room, he popularized round arm bowling, because at that point, it was only ever underarm bowling. And it was an illegal move. So sort of he had to write several treaties. And I think he even went to Parliament to be passed. And the Knight family legend is where the idea perhaps came from. He was practicing with his sister, who underarm, she wasn't like getting enough speed. So she sort of shied the ball, winged it at him in order to avoid her skirts and to pick up the pace. And then I like to think he sort of said, oh, wait a second, this is a good idea. Yes, so
that's all come from a woman's costume, I guess. If
exactly, that's
having a ball like that.
exactly that's why the theme marries up so well.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. Do you get to? You've said that you occasionally like dressing up in Regency costume. Do you get to do that in the exhibition? Are you sort of stood in there dressed up yourself, or?
I'm not, and I feel I've missed a trick. I should purchase a riding habit.
I think, yeah, we need to get you a riding habit made for work purposes.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think the word occasionally there needs to come with a little star. Yeah,
occasionally, would do it all the time, clothes permitting. Actually, Kim's been dragged into a bonnet recently, haven't you, Kim?
Yes, yeah. To my shame, we go and do talks in schools sometimes. So this one was we went down to a school in Surrey and talked about Regency etiquette, which was very fun. But yeah, you did finally manage to get me into costume after about 6 years, I think, of gentle prodding.
That's amazing. I expect those photos to be on the website very prominently soon, I'm sure. So you've mentioned all the talks and things that are happening in the exhibitions, which is incredible to hear about what you've been doing and what you're doing currently. But what's next for Chawton House, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, that's a big question. In terms of the kind of the exhibitions and the programming, next year is a really big year for us because it's our 20th anniversary of opening. So we've been kind of having a think about how we could best showcase what we do. So we've got 2 exhibitions planned. Our curator and collections manager is doing a travel writing exhibition to follow Clio's, which will run into the kind of early part of 2023. And then I'm curating an exhibition on letters and networks. So we've provisionally called it Quills and Characters. And so I want it to be partly about letter writing itself, but also about the kind of communities that were created through letters. I think there are a lot of kind of really interesting projects that are going on to elucidate this. So I'm hoping that we can bring some of those projects together and share them. Yeah, recently did a bit of work on we've got a letter from Mary Somerville in our collection, who's a kind of, she was a scientist. And so I ended up sort of combing through the archives in the Bodleian, looking at some of her correspondence. And there's so much that's exciting to kind of bring out from just these little snippets that we actually have at Chawton itself. So that's the first exhibition. And then the second one's going to be a biographical exhibition on Mary Robinson. So I think both of those kind of capture, I suppose, what we do. One of them's about, the recovery project and the lives of some of the women writers, and the other one's about these amazing kind of networks that women writers are working in and also kind of facilitating and producing. So that's kind of 2023, and then we'll have a kind of program of events as well. We do one academic conference a year, a couple of study days, and then a series of talks as well. And I think it's been really interesting over the last few months to just sort of see how demand has developed and what's kind of changing. I think, there's still this demand for online talks, but it's sort of shifting slightly. I think people are a bit zoomed out at the moment. So it'd be interesting to kind of see where that goes and to look at kind of hybrid events. But it's also just really nice to have people back on site. I think, yeah, Clio launched her exhibition last week, and I think that was a really just sort of uplifting thing to have people in the house. So I think those are some of the plans. Clio will also probably have more to say on those. I mean, I think a Regency ball is long overdue as well, isn't it, Clio?
It's definitely on the cards. We do need one, and there's an appetite for it because of Bridgerton. Yeah, Kim and I have both been to the Bridgerton Secret Cinema experience, and we love, for research purposes, of course.
Was it good?
It was involved drinking a lot of wine and doing charcoal sketches of people all night. And yes,
exactly.
That sounds like research to me. I fully endorse that. No, Regency Ball sounds incredible, and I mean, my PhD's on letters, so when you said that, I was thrilled. So I'm sure I'll be coming down for that. That sounds great.
the other thing to say is that, we're going to be hopefully maintaining or expanding our visiting fellowship program. So hoping to have, researchers living on site in-house for a sort of portion of the year. And I think that's also really exciting. And yeah, hopefully more people will apply as well. We've had lots of applications this year. So yeah, watch this space.
That's amazing. So many exciting plans for the future by the sound of it. And I'm going to finish on perhaps the most difficult question of all, which is, what is your favourite item in the collections and why?
Like theme it. So sort of favourite painting, favourite book, favourite miscellaneous. I think otherwise we'll be struggling.
What's your favourite book? Maybe?
I've got a few candidates. So because I'm at heart an early 18th century person, we've got some early editions of Hayward. But one of the things that I really love is it's a translation of Madeleine de Scudery's Clélia, which is a sort of giant romance, and the book itself is it's huge and fantastic. But if you open it, there's a carte du tendre in there, which is like a map. Is a cartography of love, and I think it's amazing. So there are kind of different pathways that you can go on, and there's the sort of lake of indifference on one side, which you have to avoid, and you can go straight up the middle to which is obviously the kind of best path, but you can sort of get lost in various places. There are like the rocks of iniquity and all sorts of kind of excellent stuff. So yeah, as a kind of amatory fiction fan, that's quite a kind of amazing item, I think. We've got a collection of Gothic blue books, which I think are really amazing. Partly because I think they're quite rare, because of course they were just read out of existence as sort of pulp fiction. My favourite portrait is the one of Amelia Opie, because I'm working on some of her letters at the moment. And yeah, like looking at the portrait, but also curse her for having really difficult handwriting and for having crossed her letters in just the most disgusting way. So yeah, I think I'd like to reprimand her every time I go past her. And then there's the Bentley set, which is the first time that Austen's novels were collected together in 1833. The set that we have was the Knight family set, and it ended up in America and was found and brought back to us by a very generous supporter, I think in 2017. So those are they're really very special, I think, as well. Hopefully I haven't impinged on yours, Cleo.
No, you haven't. I mean, I love all of those things, but because I was just waiting for you to like steal one of my favorites. But that's the great thing about Chawton House. We have so much good stuff. What can I say? So I think for me, the sort of work that captures Chawton House and what we do and our mission is the Elizabeth Blackwell Herbal. It is this huge tome from early 18th century, and it was written by a botanist, Elizabeth Blackwell, who was married to a wrong-un, as seems to be the theme of most of our stories of 18th century women.
Terrible husbands.
terrible husbands. He was in debtor's prison, and he was a quack doctor as well. So she took up rooms near Chelsea Physic Garden because she saw a gap in the market, which again, like so remarkable to sort of see that. There were loads of plants from the New World, which had different sort of physical properties. So she hand drew all of these new plants, and then her quack doctor husband sort of gave her the intel on what the plants could be used for, and she created this huge 2-volume sort of it's absolutely massive, and it was on display for the first time in our Botanical Women exhibition curated by our chief executive Katie. But it's each print and each engraving is hand colored by her, and it is so beautiful and also so useful, like this medicinal properties and herbal, and it's sold for £5, and so obviously she made enough money to get her wrong-un husband out of prison. And again, when I say it sort of captures the essence of Chawton House, we have an Elizabeth Blackwell herb garden in homage to that work, and it sort of is split into 4 quadrants, each quadrant dealing with different sort of ailments as prescribed by the 18th century. So there's the head bed, so dealing with headaches and sort of all of that, and then sort of skin, and stomach, and gosh, Kim, what's the last one? Lungs, is it? Or
maybe, yeah.
So I mean, that to me, I just absolutely love that work, and it's so varied, and it was wonderful that it could be sort of put on display, and we received some funding to have it conserved for that purpose. Otherwise, we have a first edition of Old Mother Hubbard, which is this tiny little chapbook, and it's again hand painted and hand illustrated. And Old Mother Hubbard comes home and her dog's up to no good. By the end, he's sort of on his hind legs dancing. And it's just such a fun, silly book. But it's really beautiful and very precious as well. So, and yeah, I just love that. My favorite portrait is of Mary Robinson. So when we, Emma sort of pitched the exhibition dedicated solely to her, I was thrilled because she deserves all the attention, and it's just so beautiful.
It is by far the best looking portrait in the house as well. So
it's great.
It sounds incredible, and such a varied amount of I don't know, items, artifacts, so many cool things. And I know that you're constantly acquiring things as well. So I've literally just seen that you've acquired Charlotte Smith's first novel, The Fatal Attachment in English, I believe.
Yeah, it's a translation of Man on the Score, which I think is how you pronounce it, but maybe not.
I don't know. I've just come back from France, but I can't possibly pronounce. But yeah, that's incredible that you just keep on acquiring things, and that the collection's still growing, and you know, these amazing. It's amazing that it's open for researchers and the public to come and see all the wonderful things that you do.
Yeah, the library acquisitions are ongoing, and thanks especially to the work of this amazing society called the Godmersham Lost Sheep Society, and they're sort of scattered all over the world, and what they do is comb through kind of different libraries to find items that belonged in the original Knight family library. So a lot of them were sold off in the early 20th century, and so Gloss bring those items back, but they're also constantly on the lookout for books that we might be interested in. It's again brilliant to have this sort of team of literary detectives working with us. A lot of them are in America, so the emails come through early in the morning, which is always a good way to start the day.
Yeah, I can imagine. That sounds amazing. I feel like I need to sign up to this. What a wonderful thing to do. And on that note, sorry, go on, Clio.
You receive an email and someone will be like, "We found another lost sheep," and everyone, "Oh my God, get it!" So it's good fun. It's very nice atmosphere.
Yeah, I can imagine. How wonderful. So cool. And on that note, thank you very much, Kim and Clio, for today's interview. I have enjoyed it so much. I'm literally going to look at trains now to come down and see you, because it sounds wonderful. And a note to say that we'll add any links to things that we've mentioned, to Kim and Clio's social media and Chawton House's website, etc., on their KSAA blog. So please do check that out for more information. And just to say thank you both so much. It's been so cool to chat to you.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. It's very fun.